So what I'd like to do together is give you two things here. I want to give you a process that you can use to get from plan A that's a decent stake in the ground perhaps, but probably won't work, to a plan B or C that has a better chance. And then I want to talk through some examples of companies that illustrate these 5 building blocks, these 5 elements of every business model, and do so in radical terms. And the first company I want to tell you about is a company you know well, right? Apple. And what is it that they made 10 years ago? PCs, right? Who had an Apple 10 years ago? Yeah? Did you like it? Loved it. Fantastic computer. Was Apple selling a lot of them compared to other people? No. Market share, low single digits. Was Apple making money? No. Steve Jobs came back. He had to fix the company. And Steve said, you know, the way you turn around a company and really make a difference and really do something meaningful is you find a really big problem to solve. And the really big problem that he found to solve was a problem the music industry had. And what was the problem? Piracy, right? Nobody in this room, of course, ever downloaded anything from Napster, but a few people were downloading things from Napster, right? And so who wasn't getting paid? The music companies, the artists, the performers, the whole value chain's not getting paid, and they're only selling songs one at a time instead of a CD of 15. They have a problem? They got a really big problem, right? So Steve Jobs says, I think we have some skills that could be well suited to solving that problem. He then said, well, has anybody tackled this issue before, or something like this before from which we can learn? Turned out there was a company called Sony who had sold 300 million Walkmans to that date. Does that suggest there's demand for a portable music device? Yeah, okay. Napster had 26 million active users, and lots of Napster knockoffs had lots more users. Is there demand for music one tune at a time? Steve Jobs says, yes, there is. There are these two good analogs, I call them. Companies that have come before you that have done something like you're going to do, maybe not in your industry, that you can copy. There are also a couple really important anti-logs. Companies that come before you where you're going to say, I'm not going to do it that way because it didn't work, or I want to do it differently for some other reason. There was a device called the Diamond Rio. Did anybody in the room have a Diamond Rio? It was one of the very first MP3 players. So this is before there was an iPod, right? And I'm told, I didn't have one either, I'm told that the Diamond Rio is the single clunkiest, least user-friendly device ever made on the planet. Practically impossible to use, but you could download a few tunes to your PC if you really worked hard at it, and then put them on your Diamond Rio. So he said, we're not going to do a Diamond Rio. That's an anti-log. The other thing he said we're not going to do is we're not going to copy Music Play and Press Play, which were two of the sites that the music industry had loaded up onto the web in an effort to compete with Napster. But they only had their own tunes. It wasn't a very good interface, and it wasn't working very well. So that was a problem. He said, we're not going to do it like those. We're going to have everybody's music. It's going to be one place, and the interface is going to be really slick. So let's think about these steps Steve has taken so far. He's looked for analogs. Who can I learn something from before I rush off and do this? Sony, Napster. Who am I not going to copy? Diamond Rio, Music Play, Press Play. Turned out there was another analog that was a really good analog. There was Gillette. How does Gillette make money? They sell razors. They make a lot of money on the razors? Nope. But then we've got to buy all the blades, right? And so they make all the margin on the consumable product, the blades, but not so much on the razor. Could Steve Jobs copy that model given who his key competitor was? His competitor is who? For the tunes. Napster, right? And Napster's price is 0, right? This is before Napster was declared illegal. So can you say I'm going to make all my money on the tunes? You probably can't. So he had to turn the razor blade model upside down. He said we're going to sell razor blades, the iTunes, at very low break-even pricing, and we're going to have to make money on the device itself, the iPod. Okay, so interesting ideas, but that left Steve with a couple of leaps of faith. Leap of faith one, will the industry, the music industry, actually play ball with us? Because if they don't, you know, clearly somebody's going to sue over this stuff sooner or later, and we don't want to get in that problem. So how do you answer that leap of faith? A leap of faith being something that is an assumption you believe in, but you don't yet have any evidence that it's true. So if you believe the music industry will play along with you, how do you test it? He said, I think I'll call Don Henley. Don Henley is the drummer of the rock band the Eagles. And Steve Jobs said to Don Henley, I'm going to do this thing, iPod and iTunes, and we'd like to have all your library. We understand you have a little problem, you're not getting paid. Would you play ball? Don Henley says, yep, sure will. Call some more artists. They too say yes. Who's the next call to? The music companies, right? I understand you have a problem. I'm Steve Jobs. I think I have part of a solution to your problem. And by the way, I've talked to many of your artists, and they like my solution. Will you too play ball? Here's the idea. So they signed up. But there was another leap of faith that he had to test. And the question, the really difficult question was, will some people pay 99 cents for at least some of the music, right, that they put on their iPod? Now, some of you have iPods, right? Who has iPods in this room? Okay, now keep your hand up if you've paid for every tune on your iPod. Oh, a couple people, amazing. Okay, most people have paid for some of what's on their iPod, right? Okay, so the question was, will they do that? So he had to hypothesize, okay, I think I can get them to pay about $1.99, but there's one way to test that hypothesis. How is that? I'm going to have to launch the site. So they launched the iTunes site, and do you know how many iTunes were sold on day one? Anybody know the number? Just north of 1 million iTunes day one. Would that be a good first day in your entrepreneurial venture? Pretty good start, right? Okay.